This is Robert Gardner, host of Fantasy Wizards. Thank you for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hi everybody, this is Baxter Colburn from Public House Media. From all of us here at PHM, we'd like to thank you for your support and wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
I'm the Greg.
And I am Dave Show.
We host the Greg and Dave Show on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out our show, The Greg and Dave Show, where we talk about strange, bizarre, and sometimes just downright quirky news stories that you may not have heard about.
A new show comes out every Wednesday. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes. And hey, thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
The latest headlines.
He's so much better as that number 2 option.
The insightful interviews.
Michael Scotto, Basketball Insiders.
I don't think there's an Italian sit-down between LeBron and Kyrie.
The hottest takes.
Teams that do run the system that Colin thrives in have starting quarterbacks.
Can all be found on Press Row. Here's your host.
You can only envy being that good ever in your life.
Christian Heimel.
Welcome on to Press Row, everybody. The final episode of the 2017 calendar year. I'm Christian Heimel. I want to thank you guys so much for being a part of the show this so far these 6 months now. Episode 30, closing in on 8 months now that we've been doing this over half a year. So we certainly appreciate all your guys' support since we started up in the summer and continuing on into 2018. A lot of fun things to do. Don't forget, you can always find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. You can find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast - Public House Media. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. Find us all over the place. You can do that on Apple iTunes. You can do that as well as Google Play, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, and iHeartRadio app as well. Don't forget to find out on the website, thephmedia.com. You can find not only our show, but plenty of others across the Public House Media Network. Fun show coming up for you guys today. John Breech, CBS Sports, he'll join us to preview Week 17 in the NFL, as well as some potential matchups in the playoffs coming up in just over a week, and then any possible head coaching changes we may see. Shine a little bit of light on just what the actual possibility is that Aaron Rodgers gets released from the Packers here this week. Some of you may have seen the story. Aaron Rodgers placed on injured reserve after not being able to, after a loss last week that eliminated the Packers, and IR rules state that a player can only be placed on injured reserve if they are unable to actually compete. So some teams questioning whether or not the Packers violated injured reserve rules, and if a player on injured reserve is deemed healthy, that team is required to release that player if they do not plan on playing him. So it's doubtful that we'll actually see that happen, but we'll find out from John Breech a little bit later any more further news on that. And then John Morgan, MMA Junkie and the MMA Roadshow, is going to join us. Big UFC matchup coming up this weekend. Holm versus Chris Cyborg, and then Khabib Nurmagomedov, as well as Edson Barboza in the lightweight division on Saturday. Those of you who are really fun into UFC will enjoy that game, that fight as well. And we'll talk to John about some of the biggest moments of 2017 and what 2018 could hold for the world of mixed martial arts. But I want to start off, as we do almost every single week, in the NBA and some of the biggest stories there. A lot of it stemming from Christmas Day, and I certainly hope all of you had a happy and a healthy Christmas, for those of you who celebrate and enjoyed it with your family, if you had the chance to. If not, we certainly appreciate you guys spending some of your Christmas holiday with us and New Year's holiday with us here on Press Row. Stemming from the Cleveland Cavaliers, Golden State Warriors, the fouls, or the no calls, should say, on both Kevin Durant and LeBron James late in the game between the Warriors and the Cavs. A game in which Golden State defeated Cleveland 99-92. The league saying that officials missed 3 late fouls by Kevin Durant and by LeBron James in their report of the game. 2 of them going on Kevin Durant, one which he should have apparently fouled LeBron on that late drive to the rim, in which there was a block that was credited to Durant and then given the ball to the Warriors. That was about 30 seconds left to go, and the Warriors up 3. So it could have given LeBron 2 free throws, could have gotten Cleveland a little bit closer. Maybe they even win that game. And then LeBron apparently should have been called for a foul with about 33 seconds left just before that, preventing Draymond Green from actually getting a rebound. Here's my issue with stuff like this. And listen, I'm one of those guys who really, I don't like replay. I understand why we have it. I think it's right that we have it. To get the call right is the ultimate goal. But when you start trying to use it for everything, like for instance, in the NFL, if we start trying to use that to decide if it's pass interference, decide if a ball is catchable or not on pass interference, if it's a late hit to the head, certain things for player safety, I completely understand and want that to happen. But for the most part, there are certain plays that shouldn't be reviewable. And the NBA, when they come out and they make these comments that officials missed fouls, it raises the question as to why can't they go and review that. And you even saw that from former Cavs GM David Griffin on SiriusXM tweeting over the week, referee ops knows they can help themselves with further latitude to address what they see in situations already under review. All incorrect no calls here should have been corrected without any additional stoppages of play. The NBA evolves and will continue to do so. I disagree, with all due respect to David Griffin. I mean, he was a GM in the league for years and understands this probably a little bit better than I do. But here's my thing. If we start allowing officials to go back and review whether a foul occurred or not, how much more does that take away the ability to decide the game from the players and from the coaches? If we're going to start putting the decision of a game into the hands of the referees, which many people already claim it's rigged and that so many officials want certain things to happen, and we saw that years ago with actual gambling from the referees to make sure that certain teams won, you can't have that in the NBA. And if it starts there, who's to say it can't happen in the NFL or in Major League Baseball when they want balls and strikes reviewed? Then you start putting too much of the game's result in the hands of the officials and not in the hands of the players and the coaches. So with all due respect to these players, I'm really happy the fouls weren't called. I watched the game. I saw that should have been foul on LeBron James on that block, and I agree with what Kevin Durant said afterwards. Kevin Durant was saying he's too big. He's too big for that. That's not a foul, and he's right. LeBron James is a linebacker playing point guard in the NBA. He's an incredible freak of nature talent, and I understand that it should be the same for him as it should be for everybody else, but no, it shouldn't. He's the greatest player, in my opinion. I will say this, I don't care what anybody says. He is the greatest player of all time in the NBA, and he is too big and too talented to have fouls like that given to him just because he's LeBron James. He shouldn't get fouls because he's LeBron James, and he shouldn't have fouls taken away from him just because he's too big. But at the same time, I completely agree. He is too big for that. That foul doesn't affect him the way it would affect a Steph Curry. So ignore everything and anything about that. I love the fact the fouls weren't called. I hate the fact the NBA has to come out and say that they should have been called, because to me that takes away from the actual game, and I'm not happy about it. It takes too much of the result out of the hands of the players and the officials, or players and coaches, and it gives it to the officials. One of the things that got lost in that is the fact that when you look at the Golden State Warriors with that win, what they've done without Steph Curry. They've basically been playing without Steph Curry for almost the entire month of December. He's going to be reevaluated tomorrow, and we'll see what he does. But a team that is 27, or that is still first place in the Pacific and one of the best teams in the Western Conference, as expected, with only one loss so far in the month of December, and that being to the Nuggets. It's impressive that they've done this without Steph Curry. So it just shows you just how talented the Warriors are. I know we get to this point. We've done it with the Patriots where we're kind of over how good they are. We're just hoping somebody beats them. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that this team is incredibly talented, and I love that they're able to do this without Steph Curry. It shows you just how good Draymond Green is. It shows you how good Kevin Durant is, and it gives him the respect that he probably deserves. Even though he did, whatever you say, he did leave the Oklahoma City Thunder and go to a better team to win a championship. You can't fault him for that. If Oklahoma City was better, maybe it wouldn't be an issue. But you got to love the fact that they're doing this without Steph Curry, that they are still playing so talented without him. Again, I think it shows tremendous strength in Draymond Green, because if you look at the stats right now, the leader in assists for the Golden State Warriors is Draymond Green. He's their leading assist guy with just about 7.5 assists per game. The next closest one is Steph Curry with 6.6. So it just shows you how talented Draymond Green is. He's playing at a Hall of Fame caliber level. Over 10 points, 7.5 boards, 7.5 assists per game. And the fact that he's doing this without Steph Curry just really kind of shows you how talented Draymond Green is. As we stick in the NBA, one of the teams that you kind of have to be a little worried about if you are a fan of them is the Boston Celtics, a team that was so talented right off the bat. They've started to struggle a little bit here. They've gone 5-5 in their last 10 at 27-10. Still a couple games ahead of Toronto in the Eastern Conference. But you're hoping, and you see some interesting progress if you saw the game on Christmas Day prior to the loss to the Wizards. Gordon Hayward walking out onto the court to wish the fans a Merry Christmas. That's a big sign for Celtics fans to potentially, if Gordon Hayward is on the right track, you may get him back for the playoffs, which would be huge for this Celtics team, a team that was so dominant at the start of the season and defensively still is very dominant. I mean, they're a league best. They're the only team in the NBA that is holding opponents to less than 100 points a game. The only team doing that. And I've said it to you multiple times that defense wins championships. It's a cliche, but it's correct. And the Celtics, if they have a chance to get Gordon Hayward back at the end of the regular season, maybe even into the playoffs, they're that much more talented. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. You do have to be concerned, though, for the Raptors that they are creeping up on the Celtics. 8 out of their last 10 games they have won and are sitting just a couple games behind the Celtics in that Eastern Conference standing. So we'll see what happens there. Should be some fun games over the course of the New Year's Eve holiday. But all that I know, and we'll touch on those as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline. We'll actually talk more with some experts in the NBA, but with the NFL in full swing and obviously college football playoff coming up here on New Year's Day, the NBA is taking a little bit of a backseat here on Press Row, but we don't do that on purpose. It's just one of those things that we know what people are talking about, and right now it's the NFL and, of course, college football playoff in just a little bit, just a few days away from the college football playoff, and we'll touch on that towards the end of the show. Want to give mention to another sport that we haven't really touched on at all over the last couple of months, and that is the NHL, because if you haven't had a chance to watch some of these games, you're missing out on a really fun hockey season just because there are some interesting things that are happening. You're seeing a youth movement in New Jersey, the Devils leading their division second in the Eastern Conference behind the Tampa Bay Lightning, which are still a dominant squad in Tampa Bay. But New Jersey is finding ways to win games. They're doing it in a multitude of ways: shutouts, shootouts, overtime wins, things that they weren't able to do a couple of years ago. They're doing it now this year, and they're finding ways to stay atop that division, stay right in the hunt for that top seed when it comes to the actual playoffs. And then the other fun part that I think is really neat, when you look at the Western Conference, you're seeing a couple of teams that you haven't seen there for a little bit. Winnipeg is in the playoff hunt. Dallas in the playoff hunt. Obviously, Anaheim is still there. Of course, you're going to have the Kings, which is nice to see them back on track after a couple of subpar years. And then the Vegas Golden Knights is just a great story. The expansion team opened up their home season 3-0, the first expansion team ever to win their first 3 home games. Of course, opening up just over a week after the horrific shooting at the Country Music Festival there back in the fall. To see the Vegas Golden Knights leading the Western Conference is so cool. For me, as not just as a sports fan, but as a human being in general. It's just really neat to see one of those things happen. And for Vegas to have guys like Marc-Andre Fleury and some of those names that you recognize if you are a hockey fan, you see some really cool things from the Vegas Golden Knights to be leading the division, leading the conference like that, and really having some fun, of course, with guys like James Neal and everybody else there. So it's great to see that happen. It's a lot of fun. So happy for the folks in Vegas. And you remember us talking with Steve Karp just after their home opener and after they had won a few home games of the Las Vegas Journal-Review, telling us that the city has really embraced them. They've never had a professional sports franchise, and now that they finally have one, they're really embracing it. And it's great to see that those fans getting rewarded with such a tremendous effort in their first year for the Vegas Golden Knights leading the Western Conference. So good to see that. We're hoping to see some more of it. We'll touch on the NHL again as the season gets a little bit later on, but really excited to see all of that. Coming up in just a little bit on Press Row, we're going to get to your, of course, we asked you guys for what New Year's resolutions you would hope to see as opposed to what questions you'd like us to answer here. But some New Year's resolutions that you would like to see your favorite team or athlete or sport maybe pick up in 2018. Of course, John Breech, CBS Sports, is going to join us and talk to us about the NFL. But coming up next, John Morgan of MMA Junkie, as well as the MMA Roadshow. He's going to preview Holly Holm versus Chris Cyborg, UFC 219, as well as recap the 2017 year for mixed martial arts and give us a look ahead to what some of the biggest storylines are going to be in 2018, all coming up here in just a little bit on Press Row.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Well, the end of the year usually signifies a pretty big pay-per-view in the world of the UFC, and we've got one of those here this weekend. UFC 219 is Holly Holm and Chris Cyborg for the Women's Bantamweight Championship, headlining that a year in which we saw the biggest super fight imaginable, Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. The same gentleman who joined us to preview that fight back in the summertime now joins us once again, John Morgan of MMA Junkie and the MMA Roadshow. John, thanks so much for the time here this holiday season.
Yeah, man, no worries at all.
Well, John, let's start with the big fight this weekend. Chris Cyborg, Holly Holm headlining UFC 219. Two of the women that have really kind of taken the spotlight since Ronda Rousey's essential departure from the sport. Preview this fight a little bit for us.
No, I like this headliner a lot. I mean, I know it might not live up to everybody's expectations for kind of an end-of-year card or whatever, but I really do like this fight. I mean, Chris Cyborg is something special. I mean, following her career and just what she's done, I mean, you can argue that she's the greatest of all time in the women's division, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. I mean, she is very Mike Tyson-esque in the way she fights, so it's fun to watch. And, Holly Holm seems to have the right style to beat her, somebody that can, kind of counterpunch and kind of measure the distance, those sort of things. She definitely would seem to have a cardio advantage as the fight goes late. So, Holly Holm seems to have what you would want if you want to beat Chris Cyborg, other than that just massive, one-punch knockout power in return. So I like the fight a lot. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think, this is a very, very stiff test for Chris Cyborg. And if she wins this fight, man, I don't know who else is out there on the horizon that you think that could beat her.
Two fighters that when you look at them, kind of different paths to their superstardom here. Chris Cyborg's been around for a while, but if she wins this fight, who knows if there's another competitor for her, as you mentioned. But Holly Holm, kind of a meteoric rise after the win over Rousey and then almost fell off just as fast with a couple of losses. Talk about the path that each of these two women have taken to this upcoming meeting on Saturday.
Yeah, it's wild for Holly Holm. I mean, she's definitely taking kind of the circular route to get here, man. It's, she was at the pinnacle of the sport when she beat Ronda Rousey, and that upset loss was just, just horrific for Rousey and was just an amazing moment in the sport's history for Holly Holm. And then to come back and lose to Miesha Tate in her very next fight, it's such a wild story. I mean, you had Dana White, UFC president, basically saying, hey, listen, sit out, take as long as you need, because I'm telling you the fight that we need to promote next is the rematch. It'll be huge. And Holly and her team said, no, we want to fight. We want to stay busy. We're not willing to sit around and wait for a year for Ronda to be ready to fight. We want to fight right away. And then she comes out and loses to Miesha Tate. Now, the thing about that is we'll always remember the loss, but what you have to remember is she was winning the fight. I mean, she was winning almost all of it, except for a couple of moments, including the finish. But then, came out and lost to Shevchenko, Darandami. I mean, it was just kind of a crazy route to get here. But if she wins this fight, I mean, you think about where she would stand in history. Holly Holm will have beaten, Ronda Rousey and Chris Cyborg. That's insane. I mean, those are the two women that are generally regarded as the best in the sport. So those would be amazing upsets, and you'd have to have Holly Holm, in there as one of the greatest of all time. But if she loses this fight, then you start thinking about, well, was it just one night? Was she just special on one particular night? Was it, November 2015? Was that where it all peaked for her? So a lot on the line for her. And then, of course, Chris Cyborg, again, when you have that Mike Tyson-esque reputation, do you fall against your Buster Douglas at some point? Does everything fall apart? She's kind of expected to knock people out every time she goes in there. So her reputation is always on the line. For her, it's like, if she doesn't knock people out in the first round, it's almost a disappointment. So big fight. I think this is a big fight in the women's division for sure.
I kind of hate to ask this, but you mentioned it was Holly just good on one night when she beat Ronda Rousey? If Holly Holm loses this fight, how much will people look back on Ronda's career and maybe think that the loss to Holly Holm doesn't hurt her legacy that much?
Yeah, that's interesting. Listen, Ronda Rousey, you can't rewrite history. It's interesting the way people look at Ronda Rousey. A lot of people take her last two losses and just kind of write her off and say, well, what was she? But listen, Ronda Rousey, women are in the UFC because of Ronda Rousey. Dana White has come straight out and admitted that, that he never wanted to have women in the sport. But there was something special about her that he gravitated towards and was like, yes, we're going to do that. So you can never rewrite history. You can never take away what she meant to the sport. She broke ground for women in mixed martial arts, and she is the reason that women are in the UFC today. So you can't take away what she accomplished. But yeah, those last two losses were pretty devastating. Listen, I think you can kind of look at it maybe that way. I think what will happen with Holly Holm if she loses this fight is people start to look at her in kind of that Matt Serra way, where it's like he beat George St. Pierre, but you talk about one night of their career. You never talk about their career as a whole. Nobody goes back and recaps Matt Serra's career as a whole and they talk about the one night that he was extra special, and I think that's what will happen to Holly Holm. If she wins this fight, she's a special fighter. If she loses, she had a special night.
Speaking with John Morgan, MMA Junkie, and the MMA Roadshow here on Press Row. Not the only big fight coming up at 219 in the lightweight division, a fight that I'm pretty pumped for. Was hoping it would be Khabib, Tony Ferguson, but Edson Barbosa instead steps in there to fight Khabib. Preview this matchup if you could.
Fantastic fight. Could easily be a main event on any other card. There's no question about it. You're right. It would have been nice if Tony Ferguson was in here and this was for the interim title, but Khabib Nurmagomedov, I think, is a special fighter, man. I really do think, you don't get to 24-0 no matter who you're beating unless you got some real skills. But, his body, he's had some issues. He's had some injuries, and he hasn't necessarily been able to keep up the pace I think people would like for him to see. But, when he's on, his wrestling is incredible, and he's able to just, grab a hold of guys and take them for a ride, and it's almost impossible to defend. Meanwhile, Edson Barbosa's striking is just on a different level. His leg kicks are certainly what he's known for, but he's capable of doing everything. But his striking is something to behold. So, this is kind of that old school striker versus grappler matchup. Sure, everybody's well rounded at this point, but this is kind of that old school feel to it. So I love this fight. I'm probably as pumped for this fight as anything else on the card. And the lightweight division is kind of a mess right now. And as you said, Tony Ferguson, is it him and Conor next? I sure hope so. I'd really like to see some order restored to the division, but for my money, it's about as good as you can get at 155 pounds right now.
You kind of alluded it to there with Tony and the interim championship, and then Conor, the unification matchup. McGregor said after the fight with Mayweather that he was going to take some time off, figure out what he wanted to do. How likely is it, you think, that we see a unification matchup in the lightweight division in 2018?
I think it probably happens, to be honest. I think that's where everybody's looking. The one, I guess, kind of wild card is George St. Pierre. As crazy as it sounds, Conor McGregor versus George St. Pierre would be a huge money fight for everybody involved. Two superstars of the sport that have kind of almost elevated themselves past where championships matter and belts matter. But, overall for the sport, I think the fight that makes the most sense right now is to unify those titles at lightweight. We haven't seen that lightweight that title defended at all. You got an interim champion now. So I think that's the fight that makes sense. I think it's the fight the UFC wants, and, hopefully it happens. I guess, it's interesting. Anytime you talk about Tony Ferguson and Conor McGregor, they have the same manager. So I always find it interesting, is it in his best interest to get them together and to make that fight happen? He gets to cash in on both sides of it, or does he feel it's better to keep them apart and guide them in different directions so that they can both have their, highest earning power available? I always wonder what the thought process is there. But I really do feel like the fight that needs to be made is McGregor and Ferguson, and I feel like everybody involved kind of wants that to happen.
Speaking with John Morgan, MMA Junkie, and the MMA Roadshow here at UFC 219 on Saturday, Holm versus Cyborg. We mentioned the two big fights there, but are there any other fights or maybe a fighter even on the undercard that could kind of pop up and steal the show a little bit on Saturday?
I mean, one that's way under the radar is Mark Diakiese versus Dan Hooker. I'm really looking forward to that fight. I think both these guys are talented individuals. You know, Mark Diakiese looking to rebound from his first loss. Dan Hooker coming off an incredible win, moving up division. I think both these are really young guys that could be fun. And Mateus Nicolau and Louis Smoke, it could also be a really fun fight as well. But, you know, as far as the main card goes, the return of Carlos Condit is awesome. I mean, this is a guy that's incredibly exciting. I think, you know, a fan favorite for many, many years. And he took some time away from the sport. You know, admitted that he was a little bit burned out. Admitted that, you know, kind of he needed some time away to rekindle his passion, so to speak. And we're going to see where he stands. He's up against a tough guy, Neil Magny, you know, somebody that kind of flies under the radar his entire career. But I think the return of Carlos Condit is definitely a fun storyline to watch.
UFC 219, kind of the wrap-up to the year for UFC here this weekend. But when you look back this year, we saw so much, the return of GSP, Daniel Cormier, John Jones, and we'll touch on that a little bit more, but of course the super fight between Mayweather-McGregor. When you look back at 2017, what's going to be the biggest storyline to you?
I mean, listen, it has to be Mayweather-McGregor. As much as I almost hate to admit that because it wasn't even a mixed martial arts fight, it was a boxing match, but I mean, that was something special. That was historical. You know what I mean? That's not something we're going to get this year. You know, there were a lot of great fights, as you said. You know, the return of GSP was great. I don't know. I'm kind of sour on that because I don't really like the fact that he came back and you know, kind of won the title and trashed it, so to speak. I mean, that whole storyline was kind of crazy the way it worked out in the middleweight division. I think it's good now that, you know, you got Whitaker, who's a deserving champion. He's been crowned. So that's good, but listen, there's no question about it. I mean, Mayweather-McGregor was historical, and it was fun, man. I'll tell you what. I mean, you can debate it all you want, but it was fun. It was madness. It was crazy. You know, covering the event live here in Las Vegas. It was a bizarre week. It was just madness all the way around, but it was fun. I mean, everybody was talking about it. I mean, the number of interviews I did and the number of, you know, mainstream sports people that never cover mixed martial arts that were talking about the UFC and were talking about Conor McGregor, it was something special. And, you know, I think we all knew going in that Conor really didn't have much of a chance to win that fight against one of the greatest of all time, Floyd Mayweather. But the two of them together made it entertaining. You know, everybody I know that bought that pay-per-view or went to the fight said they had a good time, you know what I mean? And I did too. And you know, it may not have been the most competitive matchup of all time, but it was fun. And it was certainly one for the history books, there's no question.
Obviously, one of the biggest things we're going to look forward to in 2018 is the developments with John Jones and his hearing on the doping scandal after Daniel Cormier, but it had his hearing pushed back to February. What's the latest that you're hearing about John Jones and his 2018, his future in the UFC?
Yeah, listen, it's not sounding especially great. You know, I mean, there's some working theories that I've heard behind the scenes, and excuse me, you know, they're still working on getting their complete defense together. But everything that I've heard is not going to clear him. Basically, I mean, he's going to be facing some repercussions for it. So that's a little bit scary because that's another, you know, big superstar for the UFC that's on the sidelines. I mean, we talked about Ronda Rousey gone. We talked about, you know, Conor McGregor, who you know, didn't fight at all in the mixed martial arts event in 2017. You know, Brock Lesnar. I mean, these massive superstars. John Jones is one of them, and I think he's going to be out for a while. You know, it'll be up to USADA and the California State Commission to see what they ultimately elect to do. But you know, everything that I've heard, it doesn't sound like anything is going to completely clear John Jones, which is a shame because you know, he's unquestionably one of the greatest ever. You could make the debate that he's the greatest of all time. But these issues that keep popping up, it throws everything into question. And it's just a shame because he seems like such an incredible athlete. You know, I don't think he needs to cheat. And I really, from everything that I've heard, it's, you know, it is just being silly, basically, putting things in your body that shouldn't be there, not necessarily cheating so much to say. It's just, you know, putting substances in there and getting caught because of it. So it's a shame. It's a damn shame, to be honest with you. But, yeah, it sounds like he's going to be facing a little more time away from the sport.
And then, John, what does the future of the light heavyweight division mean now if John Jones is going to face these repercussions? Daniel Cormier coming back. What does this mean for the future of this light heavyweight division?
Yeah, it's weird because, I mean, Daniel Cormier, certainly, I mean, the guy is a deserving champion, right? I mean, first of all, he's just a class human being, no question about it. He's a great fighter. I mean, you look at his record, he's incredible. Look at what he's done at heavyweight as well. So, I mean, the guy really is a phenomenal athlete. He's represented our country in the Olympics. I mean, he's just a great dude. But, man, when you don't beat John Jones, it kind of puts a little asterisk next to that belt, right? I mean, yes, you're the champion, but we all know that John Jones, if he was still in the sport, would be the champ. And, there's not really, of course we got Volkan Ozdemir challenging for the title, here in a couple of weeks. And that guy's had a phenomenal run up the rankings, and it's been fun to watch him. But, there's not really those clear-cut challengers. I mean, Glover Teixeira saying he wants a title shot, but seems like he would need another win. You got Jimmy Manuwa there as well. You got, Alexander Gustafsson, who will be coming back. So it's good. I mean, I think there's still some big fights available, and I think, Daniel Cormier is a deserving champion, but it's just hard when you got a guy that, is widely regarded as the best in the division. He's just not around.
John Morgan of MMA Junkie and the MMA Roadshow joining us here. And John, I'm going to ask this question. We touched on the middleweight division earlier. I'm going to ask this a little bit as a homer because I went to school with him at Hofstra University. But Chris Weidman had a pretty good 2017. That middleweight division is a lot of fun to watch now with GSP and his return to the division. But what does the middleweight division look like in 2018? And maybe more specifically, what does 2018 look like for Chris Weidman, the former champ?
That division's fun right now, man. I'll tell you what, I'm glad kind of the nonsense of 2017 is behind us. No disrespect to George St. Pierre, but I never liked that fight to begin with, I love the fact that Michael Bisping got to be a UFC champion. That dude has been a company guy, and has just been such an incredible promoter of the sport for the last decade, and has really done everything the company could have ever asked for him. But listen, I wouldn't have favored him against Robert Whittaker. I wouldn't have favored him against Luke Rockhold again. I definitely wouldn't have favored him against Yoel Romero, Jacare Souza. I mean, there's just so many tough guys in the middleweight division right now. So, looking particularly at Chris Weidman, I think he's in for some big fights. He's certainly, it's still one of those top guys. That division is just so deep right now, man. There's so many top guys. So, is a title shot possible? Yeah, but, I think he's going to have to win 2 fights to do it. So, he's got some work to put in, but there's so many top guys right now in that division. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think the middleweight division is one of the more fun divisions in the UFC right now.
It's John Morgan of the MMA Roadshow and MMA Junkie joining us here on Press Road. John, thanks a lot for the time. Happy New Year. Appreciate it.
You got it. Same to you, bro.
All right, that's John Morgan. As always, we appreciate his time. UFC 219, Cyborg versus Holm coming up. And listen, whether you like the women's action or not, these are two tremendous fighters. This is a great fight for the two of them, for the division as a whole. You heard John mention it. Dana White, even a few years ago, said he would never have women fighters in the UFC, and now you've got two of the better ones ever to do it going up against each other for the title on Saturday night. Looking forward to that. Khabib, Edson Barboza. There's a lot to look forward to in 2018. 2017, I felt, was marred by Mayweather-McGregor, and you didn't really get a chance to see some of the better fights, the better fighters in mixed martial arts because we were so wrapped up with that circus act, and hopefully it changes in 2018. When we come back on Press Row, John Breech, CBS Sports, joins us. Week 17 in the NFL coming up. Which coaches are on the hot seat and who's got the best advantage heading into the playoffs in 2017?
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast Public House Media, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Week 17 in the NFL, this regular season coming to a close. Playoffs beginning next week in the new year. And joining us now to discuss all of what has happened here over the course of this NFL season and what to expect in the playoffs is John Breech of CBS Sports. John, thanks so much for the time.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Christian.
John, I kind of want to start here on a little bit of a bad note for New York Giants fans. Well, really kind of it's another note if you consider this season. But Eli Apple suspended for the final game of the regular season. Obviously, the comments from Landon Collins earlier in the week being called a cancer in the locker room in no uncertain terms. What does this mean for the Giants? And this is just kind of another day for them this year.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's not just Eli Apple. Full season has been bad news. And it's like, if you're a Giants fan, I don't even think you bat an eye at this after what has happened, after Eli Manning getting benched, after Ben McAdoo getting fired, and this is like almost the perfect way to end this season, most fitting way to end it. If anything, this gets the Giants off the hook for some of his contract guarantees now that he's suspended. So it almost makes it easier because if they decide that hey, you know what, maybe we don't want to keep Eli Apple because he's picking fights in practice and refusing to play on scout team. You can't have a guy undermining the coaching staff, especially when you're on a 2-13 team. Nobody wants to put up with that. So, if the Giants say, hey, Eli's out now and we're done with him, it makes it easy. And that whole situation, though, is just completely crazy.
One team that is happy about the Giants' dismal season, of course, the Cowboys, and considering that they should have been making the playoffs this year. But I want to stay in that NFC East because the Eagles, a team at 13-2, aspirations of the Super Bowl, but with the injury to Carson Wentz, is Nick Foles capable of taking this team to that promised land of the Super Bowl?
I mean, watching him play Monday, I would say 1,000% no. But, every team had training camp. You have a lot of time to, if you're a quarterback, to get timing down, to get on the same page as your receivers. And Nick Foles hasn't had that. So there's always a chance that, hey, you give Nick Foles 2 weeks to practice because obviously the Eagles are going to have a bye, and then maybe he feels good about running that offense. You can't just throw someone in and expect them to be successful. So right now, I would bet against the Eagles. But, they have 2 weeks to figure things out, and maybe Nick Foles magically turns into a 2013 version of himself, and he takes them all the way to the Super Bowl. But I do not see that happening.
Speaking with John Breech, CBSSports.com here on Press Row. And, John, a couple of weird things coming out of this past weekend. Obviously, the story from the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers in injured reserve. Could Aaron Rodgers be released? But then also the Seattle Seahawks and Earl Thomas, you have him going to the Cowboys locker room and actually telling the Cowboys, when Seattle kicks me to the curb, come get me. What did you make out of those two really weird kind of moments in the NFL this past weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the Aaron Rodgers thing, so stuff like that happens all the time. It was just a big deal this time because it's one of the most famous players, one of the league's biggest superstars, and also it affected other teams. If you're the Carolina Panthers, you're probably upset that Aaron Rodgers didn't play against the Vikings, or if you're the Saints or the Rams, because you still had a shot at home field advantage last week, and if Aaron Rodgers plays and beats the Vikings, you have an even better shot. So, you're obviously going to be some teams upset because this does affect the playoff picture. I don't think the NFL is going to do anything crazy. If they want to make a statement, maybe they hit the Packers with a huge fine. I could even see them maybe docking a draft pick. But, obviously I know the crazy part of that talk was that maybe Aaron Rodgers gets released. That's not going to happen. So I think they'll either do a fine or a draft pick docking there. And then with the Seahawks, it kind of feels like everyone, the Legion of Boom especially, just sees that clock ticking on the wall, and, maybe it's time up. You look at Richard Sherman. There's no guarantee he's going to be back next season. Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, both have been banged up all season, and it's possible the Seahawks want to get younger and cheaper. Now, Earl Thomas is under contract with Seattle next season, so I don't think he's going to be going anywhere. But after that, hey, the Cowboys don't have a great secondary, and if Earl Thomas is out there after the 2018 season, it wouldn't be a horrible move for them to look into signing him.
We've had an interesting season so far this year, John, and no more so than looking at some of these division champions. Jacksonville in the AFC South, the Rams in the NFC West, the Eagles in the NFC East, the Vikings in the NFC North, and then potentially in the South, you got the New Orleans Saints could be the division champion there. Of those division champions, which one would have surprised you the most if I had told you that's who was going to win that division come the start of the season?
Definitely the Rams. You look at the AFC South where the Jaguars won. Jaguars obviously surprising, but I thought that was the weakest division. Anybody could win it just because it's so bad all the time. We didn't know Deshaun Watson was going to be amazing. Andrew Luck's not playing all year, and you never know how good the Titans are going to play. So that division is just a wild card to me every year that any team could win at any point. So definitely the Rams, because you look at the Seahawks, you kind of said, hey, this team's the favorite. You look at the Cardinals, you say, hey, there are windows closing. It's either now or never for the Cardinals. It definitely felt like the Rams were going to be the third best team in that division at best, and then they come out and win 11 games, maybe 12 if they win on Sunday, even though they're benching everyone. So definitely the Rams with the most surprising division winner of the season.
Probably the least surprising division champion, of course, being the New England Patriots. They're in the AFC East, but they do make some noise this week, go out and sign James Harrison after the Pittsburgh Steelers cut him in. John, this is just basically quintessential Bill Belichick and the Patriots, right?
Yeah, this is just nuts. This whole situation with all these Steelers players coming out and just kind of throwing Harrison under the bus now and saying he was skipping team meetings, he wouldn't show up at practice, he would leave the stadium on days where he was listed as an inactive, and basically he was just being a bad teammate. And Bud Dupree, one of the Steelers linebackers, just said in a radio interview today that, Harrison would even go visit Ryan Shazier in the hospital. So it's like you just have all this stuff, and it's based on this description, it's a miracle they didn't cut him a month or two ago. But obviously, classic Belichick here. Someone gets cut. Patriots might play that team in the playoffs, sign him, sponge him out, get all his knowledge, and see where you go from there. So I do think Harrison will get some playing time with the Patriots. And, this thing is going to be full of bad blood if these two teams, Steelers and Patriots, end up meeting in the AFC title game.
Speaking with John Breech, CBSSports.com, as the playoffs get set to start next week, I don't want to maybe predict the playoffs, but at least kind of handicap it. Obviously, you've got the Patriots and Steelers as the favorites in the AFC, and then, of course, the Eagles and the Vikings with Case Keenum, their third quarterback, their stud rookie running back goes down earlier in the year, but still a chance for them to be the first team ever to play the Super Bowl in their home building. Handicap these playoffs for us a little bit if you could.
I love the Vikings. If I had to pick a Super Bowl right now, it would probably be Vikings, Patriots. And the thing about the Vikings is that they've beaten all the other NFC contenders. I mean, they handily beat the Rams. They pretty handily beat the Saints. And, yeah, they lost to the Panthers, but that was one of those kind of crazy close games. But the Vikings are they just don't really have a weakness. Like, their weakness is Case Keenum, if you want to say it's a quarterback, but he's been so good that he's not really a weakness anymore. You look at the Jaguars, Blake Bortles is definitely, I don't care. He had 3 good weeks, and I know everybody loved what he did in early December, but I think when he gets to the playoffs, we're going to see closer to the guy we saw in the 49ers game, throwing interceptions, throwing pick sixes, than what we saw in early December. So, I love the Vikings in the NFC and in the AFC. The Patriots, the obvious pick, but I do think that the Chiefs are probably the scariest team there. We saw what they did to New England in Week 1, and, obviously they went through that midseason meltdown where they just, I think, went 1-6 in a 7-game period. But obviously, they're back on the ball. They're rolling now, and that would be the last team I want to face if I was an AFC playoff team.
As we head into Week 17 here, John, not many exciting matchups. Probably the biggest one is the Panthers and the Falcons, with Atlanta trying to sneak their way into that final NFC wildcard spot. But to me, the interesting one here is Jimmy Garoppolo, the chance to go 5-0 in his NFL career against the Los Angeles Rams out there in San Francisco.
I mean, it looks like it's almost like Sean McVay wants it to happen. Because I think he said today he's going to bench Todd Gurley, Jared Goff, Andrew Whitworth, their left tackle. So the Rams are just going to bench all their starters and let the 49ers do whatever they want. And I think it's almost a lock that Jimmy Garoppolo wins this game. And it's just crazy that this is happening. I mean, you look at this team, the 49ers were so bad. This team was 1-10. Garoppolo comes in, and now he's undefeated with this kind of talent around him, which is not great talent. I mean, 2 weeks before he started, they got blown out by the Eagles. They got blown out by the Cowboys. And then all of a sudden, Jimmy shows up, and, they're on a roll. So I do think they're going to win this week. I think he's going to end the season undefeated, and then I think he's going to sign a $7 billion contract at some point this offseason.
John Breech, a man who, according to his bio, one of only 3 people left on Earth who thinks Andy Dalton will eventually win a playoff game. And, John, we hope for your sake that comes true. Thanks so much for the time, and a Happy New Year.
Hey, Christian, thank you. And just for that record, that bio is from 2014. I do not think it's going to happen anymore.
Well, hopefully we can get that rectified there, and so that you don't take the blame for any of that. John, thanks a lot. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right, that's John Breech, CBS Sports writer. Certainly appreciate him for the time. Didn't get a lot of chance to talk about head coaching rumors, but obviously the biggest ones, we know Marvin Lewis is leaving. The biggest questions, I think, truthfully come in Chicago and Tampa Bay with John Fox. Could he be losing his job? Who knows? A lot of it has been with Mitchell Trubisky. I didn't think this was the right time to start Trubisky. I thought this would have been a great year to just let it go and maybe see what happens. But then Dirk Cutter in Tampa Bay, it's really just been a bad year for the Buccaneers, a team that should have been a lot better than they were. Other guys you look at, Chuck Pagano and the Colts, I don't know if you can really fire him considering Andrew Luck wasn't there at all this year. Jim Caldwell in Detroit, who knows? They haven't really done great, but we'll see what happens there. Vance Joseph is interesting because the Broncos were up and down at the start of the year, but I don't know if anything changes there, because the biggest question with all of this is who is out there. That's what I've always wondered. Who is out there to go get? Who can the Giants go and get? We already know that the Bengals are going to need a head coach. The Browns reportedly will not, but who knows? We'll wait and see until Black Monday coming up here in just a couple of days. But the playoffs do start next week. We'll get into more of that when it comes. The really exciting thing to watch out for here is I think if Atlanta can sneak in, because as I've been telling you guys for weeks now, the Atlanta Falcons, they played 5 of their last 6 games against divisional opponents, and a chance this week with a win and maybe some help to clinch that final wild card spot in the NFC. But should be a lot of fun. Week 17, the regular season coming to a close. We hope you guys enjoy it, and when we come back, some of your New Year's resolutions, as well as a quick preview of the college football playoff coming up on New Year's Day.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Closing up shop here on Press Row, wrapping up 2017 in the world of sports. As always, we appreciate your guys' feedback, your guys' input. You can find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, at PressRowPHM. Find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast Public House Media, or email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with all of your friends and family this holiday season. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Google Play, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, broadcasting as part of iHeartRadio, as well as thephmedia.com. You can find us there as well. New Year's Day, it's finally here, the college football playoff. It's going to be a fun one. We'll see exactly how it all pans out. Whether you like the fact that Alabama got in or not, as I've told you multiple times, I don't think they deserve to get in. It should have been, in my opinion. Still will be my opinion. It should have been the USC Trojans in the fact that they actually won their conference. But we'll see how that all happens. I still will fight to the death about the expansion of the college football playoff to include every conference champion, because a school like UCF should 100% have a chance to compete for the national championship. Whether they actually have one is up for debate, but they should at least be given the opportunity to compete. So I'm all for expansion that includes every single conference champion, no matter where they come from, whether it's the MEAC, the SWAC, the Big Sky, whatever it is. If it's Division I and you're part of what's considered the FBS, the Football Bowl subdivision, as it used to be called, you should be given the opportunity to compete for the national championship. But we're still a couple years away from expansion. It looks like it's going to go to 8 if it does, but it's going to be a few years from now, maybe 2022, if that happens, when it comes time to actually discuss all of that as well. But big games coming up. Clemson, Alabama 3. As I've told you a couple of times, the college football playoff is all about TV ratings, and you better believe if Notre Dame didn't have 3 losses and Notre Dame was an 11-1 team and their only loss was to Georgia, they would 100% be in over Alabama, because they will draw the most TV ratings and the better numbers. So the fact that you're going to have the third meeting of these two schools in the last 3 college football playoffs is pretty impressive. Be fun to watch and see what happens. I give the slight edge to Alabama just because, but part of me is really, really pulling for Kelly Bryant and Clemson to see if they can pull off the upset. I just realized I said Auburn instead of Georgia. Part of me is really kind of pulling for Clemson here and Kelly Bryant just to see if they can pull off. I don't know if you call it an upset. It's like that 10-7 matchup or that 9-8 matchup in the NCAA tournament. If the lower seed wins, is it really considered an upset? It probably would be if Alabama does, just because Clemson surprisingly has been pretty good this year. I wasn't expecting them to be this dominant without Deshaun Watson. I thought the ACC would be a lot better. Of course, a lot of that had to do with the fact that DeAndre Francois, the quarterback at Florida State, got injured at the start of the year, and then Miami losing to Pitt didn't really help, and then getting the doors blown off of them is what really was impressive. But Clemson has really been very exciting throughout this year. They've gotten better as the season has gone on. As mentioned, that huge ACC championship game victory over the Hurricanes, a team that a lot of people thought might be able to come away with a victory there. But what's maybe even more impressive than the fact that you've got guys like Travis Etienne, Kelly Bryant, and of course wide receiver Deion Kane for the Tigers is you've got the growing talent of Jalen Hurts, the quarterback at Alabama. A couple of years ago, he would have been a reason why they lost this game. But he has turned into a talent, a force, both running and throwing the football. Last year, when you looked at him, he was kind of the big question mark for Alabama. And I don't want to say it was a reason why they lost the national championship game last year. Obviously, a great play call by Dabo Swinney and tremendous execution from the Clemson Tigers on that last-second play. But you look at him this year, he's taken care of the football more than anything else, close to 2,000 passing yards, a 61% completion percentage, 15 touchdowns and just 1 interception. He is a little bit more of a running quarterback, and you saw that this year. He's turned away from passing as much last year. His passing numbers are down almost 800 yards. His passing attempts are down 160 from a year ago, and thus his touchdowns have gone down. So have his interceptions, though, so he's get better care of the ball, but maybe as a running back, he hasn't. As a runner, it's kind of taken away a little bit from what Alabama is able to do, especially with a guy like Damian Harris with 11 rushing touchdowns this year and close to 1,000 rushing yards. The other thing that I'll mention is with a guy like Jalen Hurts, when he is changing his approach from a quarterback standpoint, not throwing the ball as much, it kind of makes it obvious who he's going to throw to. Much like last year at Clemson when we knew Deshaun Watson in that situation is going to go to Hunter Renfrow, we know for a fact that when Jalen Hurts drops back to throw, he's looking for Calvin Ridley. Again, 15 touchdowns for Jalen Hurts through the air. Only 3 of them have gone to Calvin Ridley, but he has been his go-to guy with almost half of the passing yards that Jalen Hurts has thrown for have gone to Calvin Ridley. So wouldn't be surprised at all to see Alabama win this game. I wouldn't call it an upset. I still personally think that Kelly Bryant is going to find a way to do it. Dabo Swinney is going to find a way to do it. But then again, much like I will never count out a Bill Belichick coach team, I will never in my life count out a Nick Saban coach team. So that one should be fun. The other one, the one that I'm really looking forward to, and this might be the best game out of the 3 in the college football playoff, this might be the best game, and it's going to be Oklahoma against Georgia, because you look at how talented Baker Mayfield is, and he's just so damn good. I don't care what anybody says. Aaron Torres of The Athletic, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, he may not translate to the NFL, but he may end up being the best quarterback out of this draft class, depending who comes out. Obviously, there's talk of Josh Rosen not coming out if the Browns say they're going to draft him because he doesn't want to play for Cleveland. Sam Darnold, who knows if he comes out. Baker Mayfield, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in this draft class. His ability to scramble, his ability to create 41 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, over 4,000 passing yards. Those are insane numbers. I understand he doesn't have the height you're looking for out of a traditional quarterback, but when he's got that kind of chip, he's got that kind of gusto about him, I love that. And I've said this all season long. There's no reason why the Giants need to draft a quarterback, but if they want to take Baker Mayfield in the second round, I would not have an issue with that at all, because I don't think Baker's going to be a first-round quarterback, maybe a late first-round quarterback. And boy, wouldn't it be just like Bill Belichick to draft a guy like Baker Mayfield and turn him into the next Jimmy Garoppolo, the heir apparent to Tom Brady. But aside from that, Baker Mayfield is so talented. I love him. What Lincoln Riley has done in his first year as a head coach, and that might be the most overlooked part of this Oklahoma squad, is the fact that they've done this with Lincoln Riley, who he may be a first-year head coach, but remember, he was the offensive coordinator, the guy who helped recruit Baker, not to Oklahoma, but once he got there, helped groom him into the quarterback that he is. That is just a great job from him to be able to do that, win the Big 12, and now have them as a number 2 team going into the college football playoff. And then when you look at it, the kid Jake Fromm and Nick Chubb, that combination for Georgia is great. They're just balanced in general. Nick Chubb, almost 1,200 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns out of the backfield. And then Jake Fromm coming in, a freshman out of the Atlanta area from Warner Robins, Georgia, having to come in after an injury earlier in the year. His first test is at Notre Dame, and they win by 1. And so far this year, over 2,000 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, a 63% completion percentage. Jake Fromm is going to be, the way we're talking about guys like Josh Rosen and Josh Allen this year, is how we're going to talk about Jake Fromm in 2 years. So you've got 2 great quarterbacks in this game. If you have to give an edge to someone, I do give it to Georgia's defense, in the fact that Georgia hasn't allowed many points given up all year. They're only allowing 13 points a game. Oklahoma's defense is good, but Oklahoma's defense is also giving up 120 yards more than Georgia's defense. And say what you will that the SEC is down, SEC opponents are a lot better offensively, or I think are a little bit better in that regard than Oklahoma's. I know Oklahoma's offenses that they've faced, TCU, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, they're a little bit more high octane, but it's really impressive to see what Georgia has done so far this year. And the most points they've given up was, of course, the loss to Auburn, that big-time loss. But they came back and they won that in the SEC championship game with a dominant performance against the Tigers at 28-7. So from a balanced effort, I'm rooting hard for Oklahoma. I really am. I grew up hating the Sooners. As growing up a Nebraska fan, I grew up hating Oklahoma, but I'm pulling for them hard in this game. I just think how balanced Georgia is with Nick Chubb in the backfield and Jake Fromm. I think Georgia comes away with the win. If Oklahoma does win, it's going to be a little Baker magic that gets it done. But it'll be a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoy the college football playoff. Hope you guys enjoy the New Year's holiday and all of that with your family. Have a safe and happy New Year's holiday. Before we get to the end of the show, a couple of New Year's resolutions that we asked you guys for on social media. Colin in Texas, I would love to see an underdog actually win at some point. You kind of did this year. Houston, I know Houston, the Astros were a great team all year, but in 2017, you had a couple of those underdogs. You had Clemson upsetting Alabama in the national championship game in football all the way back in January of 2017. And then you had, obviously, Houston, even though they were the best team in the American League the whole way through, they were a young team that a lot of people still didn't know if they could put it all together, and they finally did. So it was great to see that. If you want to count some underdogs, if you're looking for them, I know it's going to count towards the 2017 season, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are still, in my opinion, the biggest underdog right now in the NFL. If they win things in the playoffs, it'll be calendar year 2018, but it'll count towards the 2017 season. I agree with you, it could be fun for some underdogs, but you know what? We've got the Olympics coming up in about 2 months, and that's where you see a lot of fun underdog stories. So it'll be exciting to see that happen. Mikey in Kansas wants, as a resolution for Jerry Jones, to give up control of football operations, become a fundraiser instead, or maybe that's just asking for a Christmas miracle. Yes, it 100% is, because Jerry Jones, much like Al Davis, will never give up control of his Dallas Cowboys. And I hate to say this, I hated saying it about Al Davis, but the best thing to happen to the Raiders was Al Davis not being in control anymore. I know it happened under unfortunate circumstances. You never hope for someone to pass, but when Al Davis gives up, if Jerry Jones is smart enough and he gives up control of the Cowboys, at least from a football operations standpoint, it'll make everything that much better for this team, because I think he's got a little bit too much loyalty to Jason Garrett. He was a former quarterback for the Cowboys. He knows what it means to be a Dallas Cowboy, and Jerry has a little bit too much loyalty to him. So if you get rid of Jason Garrett, who knows what kind of coaching you could bring in? Who knows if you bring in a coach with the kind of mindset to run the football? I mean, I know Jerry wants to win, but I also know that he loves his quarterbacks more than he does anything else. There's a reason he loves Troy Aikman. There's a reason he held on to Tony Romo for so long, even still in this past summer, saying that Tony Romo was going to be given a fair shot at competing for the trophy, for the title of starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. So as much as you may love Dak Prescott, and I think he's a great talent, the best player on your team is Ezekiel Elliott, and if you get rid of Jason Garrett, Jerry Jones is only going to hire a coach who's got a passing mindset. He's not going to hire a coach who's going to want to run the football behind the best offensive line and the best running back in the game. So you're not going to see that happen. It's unfortunate, but I think the best thing that could happen for the Cowboys is if Jerry Jones relinquishes control of that, and you're not going to see it happen. So the Cowboys, a very disappointing year for them. The only good thing for the Cowboys this year is the fact that the Giants were that much more of a dumpster fire than them in their own division, so it certainly helped. But 2018 is going to be an even rougher year because you're going to start losing Dak and Zeke when they get to that threshold of their rookie contract where they're going to start to get paid a lot more. And if they could get paid to go for a play for a coach who wants to utilize their skills better, boy, I just imagine Ezekiel Elliott gets out of that rookie contract and he knows that he may not be the focal point at this place, but he could potentially win at this place and win with a coach like Bill Belichick who knows how to utilize a running game. That would be a dagger to the hearts of Cowboys fans all over the place if Zeke Elliott ends up going and playing for a place like the Patriots, or when Todd Gurley, if he goes and plays in Los Angeles for the Rams, if he goes and plays in Green Bay because the Lord knows they need a running back and Aaron Rodgers isn't getting any younger. And man, that might actually be the funniest thing if in the 2020 playoffs, Zeke Elliott runs for 130 yards in Dallas to send Green Bay to the Super Bowl. That would be something else. But again, you're not going to get any better as an organization if Jerry Jones is still in control. Let him be a GM. Let him sit in the box with all of his celebrities and all of his political friends and the other owners and enjoy it. Let him be Robert Kraft. Because you know what? Robert Kraft loves his life right now. Super Bowl rings galore. And one of those guys that is just respected throughout the organization. As always, we thank you guys for the support this year in 2017. We look really forward to our full year on this podcast as part of Public House Media in 2018. Thanks so much for being with us throughout this year. Don't forget you can subscribe, rate, review Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, of course the website thephmedia.com. Find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. Email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. And find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast Public House Media. And as always, guys, we appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Thanks to John Breech of CBS Sports for joining us, as well as John Morgan, MMA Junkie, and the MMA Road Show. Enjoy your Happy New Year, guys. Be safe. Enjoy it 100%, but of course, be safe. I'm Christian Heimel, and until next week, I'll see you on Press Row.